In 1960, the richest man in the history of Swiss watchmaking died in a Geneva hospital. He left no children, no family dynasty, no heir. He left behind a foundation and a single instruction that his lawyers had already made legally irreversible. Rolex could never be sold, not to a rival, not to a conglomerate, not to anyone who offered enough money to make the decision tempting. The man who built the most coveted brand in the history of luxury had deliberately made it impossible for anyone to ever own it after him. Today, Rolex produces approximately 1 million watches per year. Deliberately, carefully, far fewer than it could. Waiting lists for certain models run to 5 years. The resale market has outperformed the stock market for decades. A Rolex bought 30 years ago is worth dramatically more today than the same amount invested in almost any other asset on Earth. And the man who built all of this arrived in London at 24 years old with no workshop, no craftsmen, no capital, and a product that the gentlemen of England considered a joke. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what Hans Wilsdorf saw that every other watchmaker in Switzerland missed. And you're going to understand why the most powerful thing you can build is not a product. It is something no one can ever take from you. It is 1881. The town of Kulmbach, Bavaria, Germany. A boy is born into a merchant family. Comfortable, stable, ordinary. His name is Hans Wilsdorf. But comfort doesn't last. By the time he is 12 years old, both of his parents are dead. He is sent to live with his uncles, strangers who feel nothing like home. He learns early what most people spend a lifetime trying to forget. That nothing is guaranteed. That the world owes you nothing. That if you want something, anything, you have to go and take it yourself. Most people who absorb this lesson before they are old enough to understand it either break under its weight or they become extraordinary. Hans Wilsdorf was not the kind of man who broke. At 19, he moves to La Chaux de Fonds in Switzerland, the beating heart of the global watchmaking industry. He doesn't arrive as a craftsman. He cannot make a watch with his hands. He has no technical training, no family connections, no inherited place in this world. He arrives as something rarer and far more dangerous. A young man who understands people. He works for a pearl exporter, learning the language of luxury, of desire, of making someone feel that an object is worth far more than the sum of its parts. He watches the watchmakers around him, brilliant, meticulous, obsessed with precision, and he sees something they cannot see from inside their workshops. He sees the market. He sees what people want before they know they want it. And what they want, he is absolutely certain, is a watch they can wear on their wrist. Not hidden in a pocket. On their wrist, where the world can see it. Where time becomes a statement. In 1905, Hans Wilsdorf is 24 years old. He moves to London, the financial capital of the world, and does something audacious. He starts a company with his brother-in-law, Alfred Davis, Wilsdorf and Davis, importing Swiss movements and fitting them into watch cases sold across England. He has no workshop, no machinist, no craftsman on his payroll. What he has is a vision, a Swiss supplier, an almost irrational belief that the wristwatch is about to change the world. But the world is not ready. Not yet. In 1905, wristwatches are a joke. They are considered feminine accessories, delicate, ornamental, fundamentally unserious. Gentlemen wear pocket watches, heavy gold, magnificent objects pulled from waistcoats with ceremony. The idea of strapping a watch to your wrist, like a bracelet, like jewelry, is met with open ridicule in the gentlemen's clubs of London. Wilsdorf wants to change that perception entirely. He wants the wristwatch to be not just acceptable, but desirable, prestigious, the most powerful signal a man could send about who he was. And to do that, he knows he needs one thing above everything else. Credibility. Remember that word. Because in approximately 4 minutes, I am going to show you the single most audacious act of borrowed credibility in the history of marketing. And it happened on a cold morning in October in the middle of the English Channel. This is where his genius first reveals itself. Not as an inventor, not as a craftsman, as a strategist. He understands that in a world where wristwatches are dismissed as toys, the only way to change minds is to bring in an authority that cannot be argued with. Science. He begins submitting his watches to the most rigorous testing institutions in the world. And in 1910, a Rolex, the name had arrived 2 years earlier, chosen for being short, elegant, pronounceable in any language, and perfect for engraving on a dial, becomes the first wristwatch ever to receive an official chronometric precision certificate from the Swiss Timing Authority. Then in 1914, the Kew Observatory in England, one of the most respected scientific institutions on the planet, the very institution that certified the precision of instruments used by the British Royal Navy, awards a Rolex wristwatch its highest classification. Class A, the same standard reserved for the chronometers used to navigate warships across the open ocean. In one move, Wilsdorf has transformed his wristwatch from a fashion accessory into a scientific instrument. He has borrowed the credibility of an empire and attached it to something you wear on your wrist. The market cannot ignore this. And Wilsdorf, who understands instinctively that perception is everything, makes sure nobody does. Then comes the war. The First World War tears Europe apart, and with it the trading relationships Wilsdorf had carefully built between London and Switzerland. When peace returns, Britain introduces punishing import duties on luxury goods, including the Swiss watch movements at the heart of his business. Any lesser man might have fought the policy, lobbied Parliament, found workarounds. Wilsdorf does something far more decisive. In 1919, he picks up the entire company and moves it to Geneva, Switzerland. Not just for tax reasons, for identity. Because Geneva is not merely a city, it is a symbol. Swiss watchmaking is the finest in the world, and everyone knows it. By moving to Geneva, Wilsdorf is not just solving a problem. He is completing a transformation. Rolex is no longer a British company buying Swiss movements. It is Swiss. It belongs to the greatest watchmaking tradition in human history. That repositioning, quiet, invisible, strategic, is worth more than any advertising campaign he could ever have bought. But the masterstroke is still coming. In 1926, Rolex unveils the Oyster, the first wristwatch in history with a completely waterproof and dust-proof case, a screw-down crown, a hermetically sealed case back, a design so perfectly sealed it can be submerged in water without the movement inside suffering any damage whatsoever. The name is deliberate and brilliant. An oyster, closed upon itself, impenetrable, protecting what is most precious within its shell. But Wilsdorf knows that announcing the Oyster is not enough. Telling people a watch is waterproof means nothing. He needs to show them. He needs a demonstration so undeniable, so dramatic, so publicly witnessed that no one on earth can question the claim. And in 1927, he finds his moment. Her name is Mercedes Gleitze. She is a young English secretary, 26 years old, passionate, fearless, and about to attempt something almost nobody believed possible. Swimming the English Channel. More than 33 kilometers of freezing, churning, merciless water between England and France. The crossing will take her more than 10 hours. 10 hours in the North Sea, in the cold of October. And on her wrist is a Rolex Oyster. When she emerges from the water, the watch is working perfectly. 10 hours in open seawater. The Oyster does not fail. The movement does not stop. The case does not leak. And Wilsdorf, who has been watching all of this with the precision of a general deploying his forces, buys a full-page advertisement in the Daily Mail, one of the most widely read newspapers in England, and announces the result to the world. This is 1927. There is no television, no internet, no social media. There are newspapers, and there are people who read them over breakfast. And on that morning, hundreds of thousands of people opened the Daily Mail and read about a watch that survived the English Channel. Not a laboratory test, not a controlled experiment. A real human being, a real body of water, a real achievement witnessed by the world. Hans Wilsdorf has just invented influencer marketing 90 years before anyone knew what to call it. 4 years later, in 1931, Rolex changes the game again. The Perpetual movement, a self-winding mechanism powered by a rotor that turns with the natural movement of the wearer's wrist. It eliminates the need to ever win the watch manually. A watch that wins itself. A watch powered by the life of the person wearing it. The more you move, the more it runs. The more you live, the more it works. The metaphor is almost too perfect to be accidental. And here, right here, is the turn that changes everything you have seen in this story so far. Everyone assumes Rolex sells precision, the Swiss certification, the waterproof case, the self-winding movement, the technical achievement stacked upon technical achievement. They do not. What Rolex sells is the fear of arriving and having nothing to show for it. When a man puts a Rolex on his wrist, he is not buying a timekeeping device. Timekeeping devices cost $30. He's buying proof. Proof that he made it. Proof that the distance between where he started and where he stands now is real and permanent and visible to anyone who looks. Hans Wilsdorf understood this before he had a single watch to sell. He understood it in 1905 when the gentlemen of London laughed at wristwatches. He was not selling a product. He was selling the right to be taken seriously. Every decision he made after that, the Swiss certification, the English Channel, the summit of Everest, was not marketing. It was the construction of a mirror. A mirror that, when you look into it wearing a Rolex, shows you the version of yourself you worked your entire life to become. The 1950s and 1960s are the age of human ambition on a scale the world had never seen. Men climbing the highest mountains. Men diving to the deepest depths. Men racing at speeds that made death a genuine possibility on every single lap. And Rolex decides that its place is on the wrist of every single one of them. In 1953, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay reached the summit of Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth. Hillary wears a Rolex Explorer. That same year, Rolex launches the Submariner, built for the men pushing into the last unexplored frontier on the planet. In 1960, a Rolex descends to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, nearly 11,000 meters below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, the deepest place on Earth, and comes back working perfectly. In 1963, the Cosmograph Daytona is born, named for the legendary Florida racing circuit, built for the men who drove cars at the absolute edge of what was survivable. The message behind every single one of these products is identical, and it is the most powerful message any brand has ever constructed. Wherever the limit of human endurance is, we are there. Hans Wilsdorf never stopped working. He lost his wife Florence in 1944. She died young, and those who knew him say he never fully recovered. He left no children. He had no dynasty in the traditional sense. What he had was the company. And in the year Florence died, he made a decision that would define Rolex for the next century and beyond. He transferred the entire company into a private trust, the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a non-profit organization that would own Rolex forever, ensuring it could never be sold, never be taken over, never be forced to answer to shareholders or quarterly reports. He built a fortress around his life's work, a moat that no hostile bank, no rival conglomerate, no financial crisis could ever cross. He died in 1960. He never saw the Submariner become a cultural icon. He never saw the Daytona become the most coveted watch in history. He never saw his brand become the universal shorthand for success, for arrival, for the quiet declaration that you had made it. But he built the foundation so perfectly. The values, the independence, the obsession with quality, that everything that came after was simply the continuation of what he had already set in motion. Today, Rolex produces approximately 1 million watches per year. Deliberately, carefully, far fewer than it could. Because scarcity is not a side effect of Rolex's success. It is a core part of the product itself. Waiting lists for certain models stretch to 3, 4, 5 years. The resale market for Rolex watches has for decades outperformed the stock market. A Rolex bought 30 years ago is worth dramatically more today, often worth more than the same amount of money invested in almost any other asset. The watch doesn't just hold its value. It grows. It rewards patience. It rewards exactly the kind of long-term thinking that Wilsdorf himself embodied every single day of his life. Every person who has ever built something from nothing faces the same temptation. to protect the thing they built by holding it tighter, by controlling more, by trusting less. Hans Wilsdorf did the opposite. He gave Rolex away, not to a person, not to a family, not to investors. He gave it to a structure, a legal fortress designed to outlast every human impulse to sell, to compromise, to take the money and walk away. He understood something that most founders never learn in time. The greatest threat to what you build is not your competitors. It is the moment someone offers you enough money to stop believing in it. The question that stays with me, and the one I want to leave with you, is this. What have you built, or what are you building right now, that you would refuse to sell at any price? In 1960, the richest man in the history of Swiss watchmaking died in a Geneva hospital. He left no children, no family dynasty. Noir. He left behind a foundation and a single instruction that his lawyers had already made legally irreversible. Rolex could never be sold. What the official Rolex story never tells you is what happened after Wilsdorf died. The foundation he created controls a company generating an estimated $10 billion in revenue every single year, and pays no shareholders, answers to no board, and has never once disclosed its financials to the public. There are historians who have spent careers trying to understand exactly who benefits from that foundation and what happens to the money. The Swiss authorities have asked the same question. In the next video, I'm going to show you what they found, and it will change the way you think about every private company that has ever told you it exists to serve a higher purpose.